I just called up. There was no cell phones. I called 411. I got the number. I called the CEO of the company, answered, and he said, come in today. And he hired me to be head of marketing. I was employee number 7, so I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I didn't know.
Hello, I'm Doug Powell. Welcome to This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. Last month, I hosted a special live recording of the podcast at the offices of Argo Design in Austin, Texas. The live setting with an audience of local design leaders gave me the chance to broaden the discussion and include the voices and questions of this diverse group, which was really fun for me. My guests for the event were Doreen Lorenzo and Mbiyimoh Ghogomu. Doreen Lorenzo is a pioneering design leader who is the Assistant Dean of the School of Design and Creative Technology at the University of Texas, a role she started in 2016. Prior to joining UT, Doreen was the longtime president of Frog Design, one of the largest and most established global design consultancies in the world. Doreen is a columnist for Fast Company, where she writes the Designing Women column, profiling brilliant women in the design industry. Mbiyimoh Ghogomu is the co-founder and CEO of TradeBlock, the marketplace for collectible sneakers. Founded in 2019, the company has amassed more than 250,000 users and over 1 million sneakers available for trade on its digital platform. TradeBlock has raised more than $10 million in VC funding. Mbiyimoh founded the company with his childhood friends Tony Malvo and Darren Smith after starting his career as a content design intern at the IBM Design Program in Austin. A bit later in the episode, you'll hear from Lawrence Humphrey, founder of Pearl, the digital platform for proactive, effective, and inclusive hiring. Pearl was a supporting partner of this live event. Now, let's join the discussion as I welcome the audience and introduce Doreen and Mbiyimoh last month in Austin. It's great to see you all here. Thank you so much for being here for this prototype of a prototype. And thanks for supporting this project. Those of you who've listened to the podcast or are following it, I hope you're enjoying it. It's been a fun project for me over the last 6 months or so. I've been thinking about this topic of designers as leaders for many years, and I've talked to many of you about this over that time. And it's kind of a fascinating experience to me that many of us have moved through our career, and at some point, or at many points, we find ourselves in these leadership roles, these new roles, where oftentimes it's unexpected, and oftentimes the roles that we move into are not very clearly defined. And oftentimes there is no precedent for the roles we move into. In other words, they're new roles, so there's a lack of a template, a lack of a playbook. So there are a lot of challenges. There aren't enough people, role models, mentors, coaches who have gone through these roles ahead of us to help shine a light and guide us through that. So there are all these challenges with this particular moment in design that I find really interesting, and all of those ideas and questions are really at the core of This is a Prototype. That's why I've been so compelled to seek out some of the smartest people I can find and have conversations with them about their experiences through this journey. You know, as I'm having multiple conversations and sort of exploring these different tangents, beginning to see some common threads, some themes, some narratives that are emerging across those conversations. And that's where it gets really interesting to me is, you know, what are those ideas that we can thread together and begin to learn from? So that's really why I'm doing this, and that's what is really exciting to me about it. And I'd like to bring my guest for the conversation forward here, Doreen Lorenzo, Assistant Dean at University of Texas School of Design and Creative Technology. Doreen. And Mbiyimoh Ghogomu, co-founder and CEO of TradeBlock. Thank you both for joining me. It's great to have you both. This is a dream panel for me. Looking forward to this. One of the things that I've tried to do as I've put together these episodes, the process of pairing my guests is an interesting one. I try to find people who have traveled different journeys and have different lived experiences, different professional experiences, and yet we might find some surprising connections between. So that's part of the art and science of bringing people together, and that's part of what I was thinking of in bringing the two of you together.
We can't disappoint.
Yes, indeed. One of my least favorite things in events like this is the reading of the bio of the guests. And so I want to ask the two of you in your own words to kind of deliver your own bio specifically about the role that you're playing right now, the leadership role that you're in, the organization that you're leading, a little bit about the complexion of that organization, maybe some of the challenges that you're facing. Doreen, you want to start us off?
Sure. As was stated, I'm the Assistant Dean of the School of Design and Creative Technologies at UT. Sounds interesting. What's interesting about it is I had no background in education. I had an education, but I was not an educator. I was asked to come and start this school 8 years ago, and we started the school 6 years ago, and we are currently have 650 students enrolled in degree programs and about 1,000 students taking our BDPs or our minors in the program. So it has grown, which is something that we wanted. We wanted to really bring the concept of design. So I lead a very diverse group of people, from traditional educators to industry professionals to staff and everything in between. So it's been a lot of fun. I think it's been a lot of fun because I had no idea what I was doing. So that made it how could I fail? I mean, I was just going to go and do what I thought was the right thing to do.
And making it up as you went along, I imagine.
Oh, well, we flew the plane and built it at the same time. Trust me. I mean, it was kind of like the Wild West. But that excitement also, if you have the right kind of people with you, it fuels, and you're making progress and you're showing progress and you're seeing the success on our end. The success is in the students, right? If these students are out there and getting the jobs and feeling really good about themselves, that's great. I mean, just a little side note, my past life was president of Frog Design, so I got to hire a lot of people. I didn't hire people from UT. Never. So it says a lot because to me, we just never hired them. Yeah.
And I think we could say the same with the program that we're building at IBM. Many of us in the audience were in that program, and we had this great university in our backyard, and we very rarely hired graduates of that program. We tried to fix that, Doreen. We stood up a pretty cool course between the two programs there. That was a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, that's the first place I went, to you. I said, okay. I was like my Lucy and Ethel moment, if you all remember who that was. It was like, I got this idea. Let's teach a course at IBM. And he said, okay. Like, what are we going to do? I don't know, but it seems like we should teach the course here. We should do it here. You should get your people involved. They should.
We're going to need a bus.
We're going to need a bus because I don't know how we're going to get the students there. All of that, and we did it. And to this day, the course is still very successful. So it's kind of, it's fun to do that.
Yeah. Mbiyimoh, over to you. Tell us about TradeBlock and about your role as a leader of that great growing company.
Yeah, so I am Mbiyimoh Ghogomu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called TradeBlock. So for those of you guys who don't know, there is a subset of people in the U.S. and around the world who are really, really, really into sneakers. They trade basically collectible sneakers. And especially over the past decade or so, there's been a massive secondary market for these shoes that's emerged. A little bit of context, two other co-founders, and we go back like 5 flats on a Cadillac. One I've known since 7th grade, the other one I've known since high school, played sports together, did dumb shit together, worked crappy jobs at the mall together. He actually had this idea in 2010. He's a big fantasy sports guy, and he kind of was just playing around with the fantasy app and was like, what'd be really dope is if somebody took the idea of kind of the fantasy sports interface and applied it to sneakers. So basically the idea was, okay, well, what if we were able to open up this idea of trading to everybody in the U.S.? And so TradeBlock is a barter-based marketplace for sneakers today and eventually other things. And a big part of the motivation was the people who create the culture are oftentimes Black and brown people who come from, modest socioeconomic means. And then there are these massive industries that are built on the backs of their cultural labor that, they don't see any part of. How did I get into TradeBlock? I was at IBM for 4 years. It was an incredible experience. I came from a content background. I was a writer and a blogger. So I came in as an intern. But, after 4 years, I think I'd soaked up a lot of free game from some of the smartest, most talented people I'd ever worked with. And I just kind of fall in love with product design more broadly. And so I was looking for an opportunity to run a product within IBM. And everybody was like, well, we like you and you're cool and you're tall, but you don't have any real product management or design lead background. So I don't know how we feel about taking a flyer on you. And as fate would have it, around that same time, my buddy Darren pulled up to Austin and was like, hey, man, I haven't seen you in a while. Let's grab lunch and catch up. Really, it was an ambush where he was pitching me on being the third co-founder of this thing. I initially told him no. I was like, I've got a great thing at IBM. I'm working on a bunch of stuff. So I was like, man, I'm tapped. But I think it's a cool idea. Y'all are, the homies who I go all the way back with. And in general, I'm very passionate about more Black and brown people getting involved in the innovation ecosystem. So I said, here's what we're going to do. I'll give you half of my day every Saturday, for the next couple weeks. I'll do a design thinking workshop with you guys. Basically, I'll share everything that I've learned in my 4 years to give you guys the best chance of success. They said, yeah, okay, sounds good. And after 2 or 3 of those sessions, I was like, all right, I'm in.
You got me.
So I got really, really excited about that and did double duty working at IBM and trying to build a startup for 9 or 10 months. And then I quit and made the leap.
Yeah. What I love about that story is how many moments design shows up, intentionally or not, in that story, and the attentiveness that you have to the experience and the attentiveness that you have to the customer. As you were describing, the customer being priced out of certain ways to participate in this broader marketplace, you're zeroed in on that. And that is like a design mindset. And so you're bringing that design sort of lens to everything that you're doing at TradeBlock, which is very cool. The whole story is cool. Doreen, let's talk about your origin story with design and your entry point into design as a practice or as a career path.
Well, I'm really not qualified to do any of the jobs I've ever had. So I went to school as a theater major, and then I went to graduate school and studied film. And I ended up working for many years in the Bay Area doing kind of TV commercials and industrials. I did a lot of work for Apple Computer when they used to do these big budget films and things. So I kind of, I did some producing work, and I moved to Austin, Texas. And there was, at the time, really no film industry, but this little computer company had started up called Power Computing. They were doing Macintosh clones. And I just called up. There was no cell phones. I called 411. I got the number. I called the CEO of the company, answered, and he said, come in today. And he hired me to be head of marketing. I was employee number 7. So I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I didn't know. But I was fascinated with this thing called the internet. I thought, and as I got more into it.
Can you give us a mark in time here?
It's 1995.
Okay.
I was fascinated with this thing called the internet. People were kind of doing stuff with the internet, but not really. And I said, what happens if we sold the computers on the internet? And so here's how the story comes full circle. I hired this company of which Mark Ralston, who was the founder of Argo, was part of. He was kind of the junior designer, but like the whiz kid junior designer, because he knew how to do software because he had a computer. So I hired him, and we did it soup to nuts. We did sold computers online. It was wildly successful. And then 1997 came around. Steve Jobs came back and said, licensing is dead. It was one of the more fun meetings I've ever sat in from a historical standpoint, because Jobs said, look, we'll buy this company or we're going to put you out of business. And he said, but I don't have any money to buy the company, so we're going to give you stock. And at that point, Mark's company had been sold to Frog Design. And the founder of Frog said, don't go work at Apple. His name is Hartman Esslinger. He said, don't go work at Apple. Come start our digital practice at Frog. And I said, okay. I'm not exaggerating any of this story. I'm not exaggerating any of it. And that's what I did. And I showed up at the studio. There was a studio on Congress Avenue that they leased for 12 cents a square foot. This is history, guys. It's 1997. It's 8th and Congress. And they leased it for this. And I walked in and I just thought, what have I done? But that started a fun a process of really, for me, learning what it was and learning what digital design was. Because, by the way, it didn't exist. How do you turn that into something? How does that become something? What does that mean? How does it have meaning? And most importantly for me, and this has always been, how to allow an environment to be in a creative environment where you can control the chaos and people can do their best work and I'll worry about everything else.
Huh. So you were seeing your role there, not as the creator, but as the space maker.
I've always seen that. I've always seen my role as, okay, how do we create the environment, even in school? How do we create the environment when people are going to do their best? And don't worry about it. Don't worry about, you worry about your vacation time or whatever it is. We're going to take care of that. I want you to be the most creative you can be. And I want you to be able to work within teams of people. And so that is my origin story. And then I left Frog. I was giving a speech about how I thought design education really wasn't meeting the needs of what people needed at PopTech in Maine. And there was a professor in the audience from UT and said, come to UT. I want you to talk to everybody. And that's how I ended up at UT. So my whole life has been like, I don't know. The door opened, I walked through, here I am. And I got to meet all of you. It's great.
Mbiyimoh, let's talk about, you mentioned a moment ago the need in your early time at IBM for that story and the team looking around saying, all right, somebody's got to tell this story. Who's going to do it? What was it that prepared you, if anything, for being the one to tell that story? Like, were there experiences leading up to that or things that you did? Or did you have an experience like Doreen where you were like, okay.
Before I answer, I have a question for Doreen. Did you get the Apple stock?
But more importantly, I have to just say this. More importantly, fast forward 20 years, the founder of the company, who had left, comes back to Austin, and I have lunch with him. Lovely man, has retired. And I said to him, do you have the Apple stock? And he still had 1 million shares. And he's been a wonderful benefactor to our school. Because I said, I see your name right over there.
I know exactly how much you have. Yeah, great question. I think a lot of what Doreen said resonates a lot with me. I heard this on some random podcast interview a couple of years ago. And it was a lady saying, like, man, I think we do ourselves and we do especially young people a disservice when we talk about, like, follow your passions. Because passions are very nebulous. And also, most people in their early 20s don't really have a good answer for what their passion is. And so what she said is, hey, the way I approach things is I follow my curiosity. And my theory is, by following my curiosity, I might eventually find something that's a passion. But if that season of passion ends, I continue to follow my curiosity onto the next thing. I think that's the way that I live my life. That's the way that I've approached my career. I think I've been really fortunate to be around people who have put me in opportunities to succeed. And to your question, Doug, about, why was I prepared to do that? I basically think life is a series of lucky opportunities, and it's just a question of how ready are you for that opportunity when it comes to knock it out of the park. Before IBM, I went to college. I was playing basketball at Dartmouth. Did that for 2 years. I hated it. I quit the team. I was like, why am I in Hanover, New Hampshire if I'm not playing basketball? So I left Dartmouth and went back to Houston and just worked for 2 years and tried to figure out basically, what do I care about? How do I want to spend the rest of my college career? During that time, I was doing a lot of self-educating. Like, one thing that unlocked for me was like, damn, I really, really like learning. And I didn't realize it until it was no longer just a given part of my life. And after doing this for a few months, I kind of had a moment where I was like, man, what's the value of me knowing all of this stuff if I'm not trying to share it with other people? So me and one of my good friends from, me and Dylan Dement, I've known that guy since like fourth grade. We said, hey, let's launch a news blog and let's write about the things that we think are interesting or important and underappreciated. It was called thehigherlearning.com. And so during, my gap years, I started working on that, started growing it, realized, man, I really love doing this. And so, when I was deciding where do I want to finish my college career, I was already had my eye on UT. I mean, basically, I was like, man, what's the antithesis of Dartmouth? I need a large state school in a real city where there are things to do besides drinking Keystone in basements, and where it's warm. So it just so happened that UT also had a really good journalism program. And so I kind of was like, I think that's what I'm doing. Let me go there and lean into this a little bit more. So when I graduated, I was looking for journalism jobs. When Colin Vaughn, who a lot of you guys know from IBM, Colin hits me up and he's like, hey, man, how's it going? And I was like, oh, it's great. And how are you? He was like, this is random, but I just got put on the stories team. And they asked, like, who knows a storyteller? And I was like, oh, I know somebody who would be great for this. So he kind of pitched me on it. I looked at the offer. I was like, oh, you pay your interns twice as much as an intro journalism salary. Well, this is easy. I'd much rather do this than sell life insurance. So that's how I got my job at IBM. And yeah, I was prepared for it because, again, it was something that I had already been kind of doing. But I think, when people ask sort of what my core skill set is, I don't say that it's writing or content. I think, if I have a superpower, it's the ability to dive deep on really kind of vast, complex, technical things, and then basically come back to the surface and sort of say, okay, here is a concise synthesis of what this is, how it works, why it matters, etc., in a way that's a lot more accessible to a broader swath of people. So that's really what I was doing more than anything. And I think that was also, in many ways, my secret weapon, because I realized, oh, there's not really many other people at this company who do that. And everybody thinks the stuff they're doing is the most important thing in the world. And everybody thinks, man, people don't quite appreciate what I'm doing. And if only I could communicate it better so people understand what you're doing and care about it. And that opened a ton of doors for me.
That skill set and that ability to say, yeah, I can help you with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, just saying yes to almost everything when I first got there, I think was a huge part of it as well.
Yeah. So the people who have shaped these journeys for you are already starting, the characters along these stories are already starting to emerge here. But that's another interesting sort of angle to take this. And Doreen, tell us about some of the people who have shaped or informed your journey as a leader. Anyone who really has been a role model for you or sort of had a meaningful encounter with over the years?
No. I get asked this question all the time about mentoring, and I think that's why I'm so fierce about mentoring people, because it was really hard. I didn't have it. In fact, what I had more of was, you can't do it. You don't have the background. You can't do this. And I'm not, it's not even stubborn, maybe a little thick-headed, so I don't realize the skills I don't have. So, I'll screw up things. Like the time I tried to decorate a cake and I ended up with icing in my hair, under my shoes, in my toenails. I mean, how did that happen? Like, there's things like I don't always accomplish. So what I observed was a lot of behaviors that I didn't like and I felt were totally inappropriate. And that was starting at a very young age, because I started working when I was about 16 at various jobs, and they were just things I didn't like. And it really impacted me about how you should behave and what is important. And so that's more of what shaped my life.
Yeah. Do you feel like you missed those role models and mentors? Like you wish you would have had them? Or are you in retrospect like, this was actually a better way to travel the path?
I don't know, because I didn't have it, and I kind of ended up here. So it's like it all worked out.
It all worked out.
Somehow.
If I might
it kind
say
of all
so.
worked out. So I don't know. I mean, I hear about some incredible mentors people have, and I was like, well, that would be nice.
Uh-huh. You mentioned a moment ago that you are really intentional about being a mentor to others. So you see that role being an important one, yeah?
I think it is important. I think my personality perhaps was, I'm just going to forge ahead and do things. A lot of people will stop when they're told, yeah, no, I don't think. And that's a whole other podcast we can do about all the things people told me I shouldn't do, that jobs I was in or shouldn't take. And so that maybe could turn a lot of people off, as opposed to saying, no, you can go out there and you can do this. Like, think about it. You have those skills. You can do this. And encouraging people so they don't stop. Because what I did realize as I got older was not everybody probably would take the steps that I took.
Not everybody would.
Not everybody.
Yeah, yeah. But the two of you are kind of telling similar versions, or there's a similarity there, coming up against a moment where you could have said, no, that doesn't sound right. That's not. And Mbiyimoh, you've talked about curiosity kind of being a driver there, which sounds like there's something there, Doreen, that you're...
Yeah, absolutely. Curiosity is always. I mean, I still think where I've ended up in my life is teaching, and being in education is about that curiosity and wanting to make sure that every student now has that same love, because that's what being a lifelong learner for me is the secret. Never stopping, never being afraid. Change is inevitable. So get in front of it, help shape it, do good things with it. And so that, in retrospect, that's always been my MO. But there were some crazy, intimidating things people said to me. Weird, fearful things. Again, I'm older. I was a woman in a field where that women didn't exist. I was a woman leader. It didn't exist. And it was pretty nasty.
So people along the way who were putting you down, trying to block your way, maybe?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know why people do that either. It's kind of a weird
insecurity,
behavior, right? Of course, It's insecurity, but it's like,
fear.
Okay, I see through you. I know what you're doing. But if you're young, that could really have an impact on you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Profound
and
impact.
You stop.
Yeah. Mbiyimoh, earlier question to you then about those key people, those role models, mentors in your path.
Yeah, I spent a good amount of time thinking about this one ahead of time. And I think, again, well curated. A lot of what Doreen says definitely resonates with me. Now, I definitely will not say that I feel like I ran into as many hard obstacles or barriers. I think being a woman is maybe the hardest possible thing to be in our world. Like, even today, that's a different conversation.
Can we come back?
More
More
podcast episodes.
I'll throw you those whenever you want. I think, but I think what really resonated with me is like, I don't know that I've ever had any real mentors. Probably largely because I think a lot of people are like, I don't know what to do with this cat. Like, okay, I can tell whatever, he's smart, he's ambitious, and he has skills in so many different places. I think oftentimes where you see mentorship is sort of like, I graduate, I really want to be a professional designer, and I have a pretty good idea of where I want to go. And so it's like, all right, I found the person who's there and can show me the path to get there. But I never really had a specific end goal in mind. So I think people were like, well, what do you want to do? But I think, where I ultimately landed was, while I don't feel like I've had many mentors, I think I've had a lot of incredible advocates who were like, again, I don't really know what to do with you, and I don't really know how to guide you, but I will put you in positions to win. And I think, there's a short list I wrote down. One is Joni Saylor, who was my first boss at IBM, who I think very quickly, basically like in our first one-on-one, said a version of what I just said, like, yo, kid, I don't really know what to do with you, but let me know what you're interested in, and I'll open the doors, I'll make the connections, because I can kind of already tell, like, you're a little too big for the very small corner that we've put you in. I was like an intern, like 2.5 months into my job, and they're like, all right, we're hosting South by Southwest for the entire company, and you're going to own all the content. And I was like, bet, sounds great. And then and I turned around to Ryan and I was like, what do they mean? I was like, I don't know. I guess you just signed up for everything.
Yeah.
But so no, Joni was huge on that front. I also have to give a major shout out to her husband, Adam Tate, who, actually very quickly became one of my best friends. And I think Adam's role was a lot more, modeling what to me was just like not only an exceptional human being, but an exceptional, like it sounds, I don't know, it sounds kind of corporate, but like an exceptional employee. Like the guy was just so thoughtful and intentional and rigorous about everything he did. And we worked really closely together on South by and then a number of other things after that. And I think just being in his orbit, I tell people like surround yourself with people who intimidate you by how cold they are at the things they do. I think it really elevated my level of performance and execution. And just, I learned a lot of really great habits being around him. Another person on my list is in this room. It's Lindsay. Lindsay was our boss at that time. And Lindsay was always incredibly intentional about being like, look, I'm your boss on paper. In reality, all that means is I'm going to go advocate for you guys to get raises and bonuses as often as possible. But like, y'all are really talented. Let me know what you need from me and let me know what bullshit I can get out of your way. And I'll go fight those fights so you guys can be the best versions of yourself.
That was Mbiyimoh Ghogomu, co-founder and CEO of TradeBlock, at a live recording of This Is a Prototype last month in Austin, Texas. We'll get back to that discussion in a moment. One of the supporting partners for this live event was Pearl, the digital platform for proactive, effective, and inclusive hiring. Lawrence Humphrey, founder of Pearl, was deeply moved by the murder of George Floyd in 2020 and the racial and cultural awakening that followed in the tech industry. Pearl seeks to correct the imbalance of opportunity for underprivileged job seekers in the ever more competitive job market. Here's Lawrence introducing Pearl to our audience.
Everyone knows someone in here that got laid off over the past year. Luckily for many of the people here, we're super well connected. We have awesome resume items, and often many of us are given the benefit of the doubt, but that is not the case for a lot of people out there, especially racially, gender, and diverse people and students, people that have a lot of work but not a lot of work history. Despite all the hiring tools, the job search is still broken. That's what I'm fixing with Pearl. Pearl is a way to, it's built on all of the best practices in hiring today. Use one resume per job, show not only what you know, who you know, but through the power of AI, enabling it to learn a lot about what you know, who you know, and combine that with a job application to make a custom resume, cover letter, and portfolio given any job that you might input, and making these trackable so you can diagnose where you stand in the job process if you're getting ghosted or just considered and haven't heard back. So that's what I'm building. Look forward to, I think the link is there. You can find it online or come up and talk to me afterwards for something you wish all design graduates should know that might make them stand out. So thank you, Doug, for the opportunity. Excited to be here. Thank y'all.
That was Lawrence Humphrey, founder of Pearl, the digital platform for proactive, effective, and inclusive hiring. You can learn more about Pearl at pearl.us.com. Now let's get back to my discussion with Doreen Lorenzo and Mbiyimoh Ghogomu. When we left off, Mbiyimoh was sharing a few of the key people who have inspired him along his journey as a leader. We pick up as he tells us about Phil Gilbert, founding general manager of design at IBM.
Phil also, he gave me the opportunity to be, I'm pretty sure, the youngest and definitely like by far the least experienced person who was ever his designer in residence. I say like you miss 1,000% of the shots you don't take. He hadn't filled the seat. I talked to Lindsay about it. She's like, yeah, you should absolutely do that. So I walked into his office one day and I was like, what do you think? And he was like, yeah, I think this could be cool.
You don't like any of my ideas, so yeah, this will be great.
Exactly. But I think what Phil realized was, oh, there's a lot of rooms where that could benefit from your somewhat exacting approach. Like my thing is I always try to get to the fundamental root of things and ask fundamental questions. And a lot of times, people are dancing around the edges of what really matters. And so I would go in and I'd be like, hey, I have license to ask really dumb questions. Sorry that Phil, foisted me on you guys. I'm not part of the team. You're probably wondering why I'm here. Like, I listened for 30, 45 minutes. I'm like, here's 2 or 3 questions that seem really important, and just sort of like, hear what would happen afterwards. But the other thing I have to give, Phil a lot of credit for was Darren came to me when I was, it was like September, October of that designer in residence year. So Phil was one of the first people to start hearing about this idea, which was called Astrolab at the time, of building a sneaker trading platform. And even though I was in a role that was basically designed to groom me for leadership at IBM, am I allowed to cuss?
You already have.
Oh.
No.
I remember actually having a lot of anxiety about this, because I was like, here is a person who, gave me this opportunity. There's 1,000 other people who were qualified to be that DIR role and probably deserved it more than I did. And I was like, damn, am I really going to take that opportunity then be like, all right, peace out. I'm going to go do this other thing. And he was like, look, man, you don't owe IBM anything. Everything that you have and the opportunities you have are because you created them for yourselves. And that sounds like an incredible opportunity. I think you should go do it. And also when I, was like, hey, give me feedback on this first version of a pitch deck, he was also like, I'm going to be your first investor. You didn't ask me, but I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. So just someone who, again, put me in positions to win. And yeah, it wasn't lip service. Like when the opportunity came where there was something that we needed that, was a meaningful step in moving us forward, he was the first person to sign up and do it. So that's my short list. Now he sits on our board and I got to tell him that 90% of the things he wants to do for TradeBlock, we can't do.
Yeah, we can't do that, Phil.
That's a different conversation.
What were you going to swear about, though?
Well, I was going to quote Phil. And what he said when I was like, he's like, fuck that. Go do that. That seems incredible. That seems so much more of a fit for who you are and what you're passionate about. And kind of in so many words, it was like, look, man, IBM will always be here, but IBM's going to hold you back, right now. And it'll always be here even if you crash and burn.
So just a side note that you don't know, I had lunch with Phil not long after that, and he spoke about you and what you were doing like a proud Papa Bear. It was really cute. He really was. He was super excited. He goes, I'm putting my money in it. I'm just putting my money in it.
And now you'll see Phil wearing J's instead of cowboy boots.
Yeah, I know.
If nothing else, that's the best achievement so far.
We have an opportunity here with all of you in the audience to open up this conversation, which is rare for me. I'm usually doing these interviews over Zoom and, really locked in. So I want to take advantage of that and give you all the opportunity to participate in the discussion. Give us your name and then your question.
I'm Catherine Marinero. You both have some great stories of people advocating for you, getting opportunities that you might not have received other ways. How are you passing that forward? What are the ways that you're doing that for other people?
On a micro level, it is really mentoring and working with people. And people come literally out of the woodwork. I had a woman, when I was doing some work in New York, flew to New York. She was from California. I'd never met her. And she said, everybody said, I have to work with you. You have to mentor me. And I said, I don't know you. And she said, well, I'm going to come to New York and I'm going to see you when you're there. And she flew there, and that was probably 9 years ago. And she's been amazing. And I got sucked into that. But mostly it's people. I will never turn down a meeting when people want to meet. I will answer every single email that people have. People ask me questions. And the biggest, that's a micro level. On a macro level, I went to the University of Texas to start this program to do exactly that, to open the doors, to make sure that these students had the ability to go out there and get the type of work they want, to be surrounded by professionals, to get that kind of mentorship from just not me, from everybody there. And that was the big push for wanting to go to a school like UT. We needed to change the landscape of what design looked like. That was really important. And you could do that at a state program, both with the type of faculty you attracted and the type of students you got. And so here we are, the school. I've been there 8 years, the school. This is our 6th year, and we're well on our way. I still think we're a work in progress, but we're well on our way. So it was the micro and the macro. That's what
I love the comment you just made about I take every meeting, I answer every request. One of my early guests on the podcast, Chris Hacker, who has done incredible things in design, said the exact same thing. I take every meeting, I answer every request, and that's absolutely a core principle. So I love that. Mbiyimoh, Catherine's question.
Yeah, fantastic question. I think the first thing I'd say is this is probably true for everything I do. I could always be much better. So I think I want to first take accountability of like I could be more intentional about doing that for sure. I don't take every meeting, but I'm willing to take every meeting. I think one thing that I do is, I try to share like what we refer to as just free game with anybody who wants it and needs it. But I also try to be, lovingly, brutally honest, especially with, younger people starting their careers, especially people of color. I think you can do folks a disservice if you're not honest with them about the reality. And I'm like, if you're reaching out to me, it's because you believe that I can help improve your, skills, career trajectory in some way or the other. So what I was saying at the beginning was oftentimes I'll tell people, I'll take a call with you, but not until you tell me exactly what you want to talk about and what outcomes you want to come out of that call. I think a lot of, you don't know these things unless someone tells you, but a lot of times people are like, I saw you speak to, so-and-so or at our little cohort thing and like, you're awesome. Like, would you be my mentor? Can you get on a call? And I basically tell those people, hey, if you reach out to someone who's running a company who's working 80, 90 hours a week, like you have to be very, very intentional if you want them to carve out that time for you. But I think it's also a good filter because some people will never follow up. And I'm like, okay, cool. You didn't really need to talk to me. The people who do follow up and are intentional, I'm like, absolutely. If we want to make this a recurring thing, I'm happy to do it. So I'd say that's a big part of it is just making myself available. And then I think, the way that we approach hiring is everybody we hire, one, we try to be really intentional about finding, we use the term savages. That's a cultural term that is very much a positive term, used colloquially. It's basically like, holy shit, that person is willing to run through walls and outwork everybody around them. And oftentimes those folks are not given, opportunities or appreciation. And I just describe it as like systematic gaslighting at a lot of different employers. And so, we really pride ourselves on finding those folks and being like, oh, we can tell you've got it. Come to TradeBlock. We're going to, one, not only allow you, but encourage you to bring your full self to the table. Whatever masks and costumes you were wearing for your old job, stop that. Like, rock what you rock, wear your sneakers, talk how you talk, and bring your full amazing self to the table. We use the term deprogramming actually a lot of like, we're going to try to help you recognize and work through a lot of those professional traumas you had. And then the number one thing I want everybody to hear from me is like, they say people in your life are seasons. Your jobs are definitely seasons. So I'm like, at some point, whether it's because we sell for $1 billion and we're all happy, or whether it's because the company fails, or whether it's because, we come on hard times and we have to let you go, at some point, you're going to leave TradeBlock. And my goal is for you to go back out into the world, not only, being an even sharper tool. I actually have a phrase, I say it at the end of every leadership meeting and at the end of every all hands. Our competence is undeniable, but hustle and hunger is what sets us apart. So the first part of that is you got to be great. And if you expect to be given opportunities and be celebrated, take pride in being the best person in the room. But then never lose that hustle and hunger that brought you to that point in the first place. So my thing is come here, be yourself, get deprogrammed. And then when you're ready to go off and do the next thing, like, I want you to have all of the leverage in the world where an employer can't, use all sorts of crazy tactics against you because your worth. You've got Google and Apple and Amazon all trying to hire you, or you're starting your own company and I'm begging you, like, can I put in $1,000 in your seed round because I know you're going to win. That's the way that I think I try to pay it forward, just given my kind of current role and position.
Yeah, love it. Love it. What do you think of that, Catherine? I'm just curious, how did those answers like resonate with you?
Now, I love them because it really shows how the work that you've chosen is not just for the work, it's for how the impact is. So by being leaders, you are actually finding the space in which you can have that paying it forward. It's not something you're doing in addition to work. Your work is the way that you are paying that forward. And that's really inspirational to hear and to know that those spaces are created for that purpose.
Love that. Thank you for closing out that thread for us. That was lovely. Who's got another question?
Hello, Elena Spratley. The word that actually came to my mind when you asked if we had questions was unintentional strategies. I know for myself, like there's been these times in my life where I find myself doing things, whether it's I learned it from somebody else or I just started doing it in a particular season and it's really stuck. And so I'm curious to know, are there any almost like unintentional strategies that have helped you in being able to jump into these different situations, remain curious, something that is kind of just like stuck with you no matter how small or big?
So something kind of intuitive.
Yeah, an intuitive practice that you've kind of honed or picked up for yourself.
That's a great question. I think everything I do is unintentional.
The truth comes out.
It's funny. Quick anecdote. I was having this conversation with my wife recently, and we were a couple cocktails in, and I was trying to describe how I live my life, and I was like, "Look, babe, it's just jazz. It's all jazz. Like I've been playing for so long, you know. I roll with the melodies." The first thing I thought of when you said that, though, is just being really proactive about asking fundamental questions. I think if you go into rooms and you don't say anything for a little while, then people start to assume like, oh, you know what's going on. And so I think you have like a relatively short period of time early on to sort of be like, hey, I don't know anything about any of this. So I'm going to ask all these questions, which y'all might think are dumb, but I don't care if you think they're dumb. But that also, I think, then establishes me as like, that's the guy who's going to ask very fundamental, maybe dumb sounding questions, but we've seen enough to know like there's a method behind the madness. And it carves out a space for that. I think the worst thing you can do is like, oh, well, I have anxiety around people thinking I'm not qualified for this thing, so let me be quiet, even though 3 or 4 things just went over my head. And then over time, you dig a hole that's deeper and deeper. And then if 2 months in, you're like, hey, now I'm going to ask that question. Everybody's like, huh? Like, we're way past that. Is that really where you're still at? So that's what I tell people is like, do it early and then you can do it all the time. And you're just the weirdo who asks dumb questions.
I agree. I think learning is one of the most fundamental things you can do when you go into, don't assume that you know anything or anything. But then for me, it's figuring out as I learn, I'm never going to learn enough to be the only, I'm not a superhero, right? So my learning is about how do you bring these teams together of people that are going to do extraordinary things. And that for me has been the most important thing I think that I've taken away from everything that I've done is who has different superpowers, but come together and you're turbocharged. And I feel fortunate that it's worked. I don't know how that came about, but I think when I look at that, it's like, oh, you can do that and you can do that. And then encouraging people to do sometimes what they don't even know they have the power to do and giving them the ability to be successful and then celebrating that success. Like, whoa, see? Look what we did. Like, you did
You're
that.
Internal and external space maker.
Yeah, well, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting. That was an interesting question because it's like, yeah, what is that? But I think it's just allowing people to also find their own voice, because I think you said it before, like you're stuck in these riveted, like that's your role and that's what you're going to do. And you're going to be stuck. And a lot of people are compliant and they want to stay there. I think I found that particularly when I got to the university is like, you don't color outside the lines. Yeah, that wasn't going to work. That doesn't really work. And so you have to give people the space and let them know nobody's going to get in trouble here. It's okay. And if you do, I'll take the fault. Like, don't worry about it. We're okay.
That theme of I've got your back. Your job is to take the risk. Your job is to lean in. Your job is to really go for it.
And your job is to do what you really know how to do, but you're not being allowed to do. Like, just do what you're good at.
Right. Which can be really challenging because for some of us, that is like, oh, God, what am I really good at? But it's an important question because sometimes it's not so obvious and it's not so, we're not so in touch with it.
I think that is often the case. And it's like, how do you begin to draw that out? And then how do you begin to also make people aware that you need each other? I mean, and particularly in this industry, like design is not a solo thing. I mean, it used to be like, early 60s and stuff. You had your solo designers and that was great, but we don't play in that world anymore.
Right. For sure. I think we've got time for one more question. Who's going to bring it?
Hi, Clay Spinuzzi. And my question is, how do you deal with failure? How do you encounter it? How do you bounce back from it? How do you lead your team through it?
Clay, I hate that word. I know. Fail fast, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, but you go through your whole life. And this is what I say, like, you got to teach the students to fail fast. It's like, I'm sorry, if they came home as a junior in college or high school and told their parents they failed calculus, they'd like, everything would have been taken away. Like, it's a bad term, but we learn. So how do we stay curious and how do we do continuous learning? And how do we feel good about that? What do we learn? Everything's not going to go right. It's just not. I wish it was, but it's just not. So what are we going to learn from it? How? Because when you open up that area, then it's like, well, what other detours can we take and what other things can we do? And we discover stuff that we never would have thought of, and that makes us feel good. Failure makes us feel bad. I don't care what anybody says. It is that whole movement I am totally against.
The movement of failure.
Oh, whenever I hear it all the time, we got to fail and we got to fail fast. What? How about we're going to learn and we're going to figure stuff out and we're going to test in the scientific method. So we're all scientists and we're doing research. Every time you fail, you like it's a success, right? Because we're like, okay, we're getting closer to the answer. Somehow in the business world, it doesn't work that way. You get fired. Like, that's ridiculous. We're not superhumans. We have to experiment. And you do it in a controlled way. Like, you have information, you have knowledge, it's not like, well, there's been a couple, like, I'm going to bet the farm and take down the trading company. That was pretty dumb. But then there were no controls inside the organization. So, if there's usually controls around you, so you're not really going to take the camp down. So learn, experiment, feel good about that.
I don't entirely buy that, but...
That's okay. You've been traumatized.
Yeah, well, maybe. But you're talking about the way we work in teams and the stuff that we're working on and how that... I totally buy into that aspect of whatever we're working on, we're iterating and the name of the damn podcast says it all about how I think about that. But I think there are also personal failures maybe that Clay was reaching for that feel different.
Are there?
I'm the one asking the questions, Susan. So you're suggesting that the personal and the work are not separate.
We're speaking in the abstract, and it's hard to come up with concepts and respond to the abstract. So maybe some examples would help, where if the difference between personal failures and work failures is something that's striking you, what are some examples that would be different?
Now he's asking you the questions.
Yeah, I left a job at the beginning of this year that didn't go the way that I thought it would go. That was a harder thing to think about in terms of iteration than that project that my team is working on.
I'm sorry, I think you need to reframe it because you learned a lot from that. You really did. Like, you learned a lot of, like, you learned what environment you want to be in and what you don't want to do.
Oh, totally.
Like, it wasn't a failure. You learned something.
No. I didn't say it was a failure. I think what Moses was reaching for there was, it felt different. And what I'm reaching for here is it's a different muscle, I guess. And yes, the principles and the approach and the frame of mind can be very, very similar, but it's different. It was for me.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm going to go philosophical and then I'm going to go practical. So I love philosophy. Just thinking about thinking. People are like, what is wrong with you? I think it's just the most fun thing in the world. I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy, and one of the core tenets of Stoicism is basically that, all pain and suffering is essentially the gap between your expectations and what actually happens. So Stoicism is basically the idea of like, well, just accept that any and all possibility is just a natural part of life. And the more that you can truly embody and internalize that, the less anything will actually bother you. And so I think, there's an aspect of this, which is, how do you frame the question in the first place and the objective? At work, at TradeBlock, what I try to do is, yes, we have objectives and yes, we have KPIs, etc. But my big thing is really framing things as we're testing hypotheses. I loved when you talked about scientific method. What I do for my team is say, you will never get your line pressed for quote unquote failing if you had a clear experiment in mind. It was a thoughtful question. Your hypothesis made sense on the surface, and you were intentional and rigorous in your process for figuring out if that hypothesis was wrong or right. If you do that, hey, amazing. Like, it failed spectacularly. Don't trip. Like, well played. I think there's just an aspect of it too, which is like, man, you gotta get out of your own head. And for me, it's basically, what things can I do to zoom out? I have a tattoo on my forearm. It says "look up." It's there because I realized when I look down on the ground, I'm basically like super tunnel vision, very, very focused on my own life and my own problems. And when I look up, it's like, oh, a tree, a bird, the sky. Like, it's all of these other things. You kind of remember I'm a small piece of this tiny world and this tiny solar system in this massive universe. And frankly, none of this shit really matters at the end of the day. I just got back, I took a 2-week trip to Cameroon with my dad. And one of my favorite aspects of those trips is I just go over there and I'm like, dog, what I'm stressing about in my cushy Western life where I have a great salary and I'm working on something fun and I get to determine my own, day to day, yeah, what do I have to be stressed about? However, when you're in the midst of it, that shit can be consuming. Last year was a really, really tough year in the kind of just the macroeconomic world, which meant that it was just brutal for the startup world. Full transparency, I'd say Q3 and Q4 last year is probably the most depressed I've ever been. Why? Because we had just raised a sizable round of fundraising. We had raised $10 million. We had been on this crazy, aggressive growth, trajectory that was part COVID, part just all of the crazy things, inflation, money being pumped into the economy, et cetera, which hit a wall. And then I realized that the prudent decision for the company was to basically fire about half of our employees right after we had raised all this money and had fucking headlines about it. And when I tell you there was nights I would come home and just lay on the floor and my wife would be like, "Are you okay?" And I would say, "I don't think so, but I don't know that there's much you can do." It's very real. And I think again, just coming back to when I talk to people early in their career, especially people who want to be entrepreneurs, a big part of what I tell them is what's your relationship with the smoke, as we say? Because yeah, this shit looks sexy from the outside. You know what 90% of my job is? Running into fires. What's the biggest, hottest fire in the company right now? And I got to go full speed into it.
We are at time here. I want to thank Doreen Lorenzo, Mbiyimoh Ghogomu, and I want to thank all of you. Great questions, great discussion. This was a lot of fun. We'll do it again. Thank you.
This was super dope.
Thank you. It's fun.
That's all for this episode of This is a Prototype, the Design Leadership Podcast. Special thanks to Mark Ralston and his team at Argo Design for generously allowing us to hang out in their beautiful office in Austin for this live recording. This also brings to a close Season 1 of the series. I hope you've enjoyed listening to these 10 episodes as much as I've enjoyed creating them. I'm deeply grateful to all of my guests for this season who have so openly shared their wisdom, experience, and stories with us all. I'm going to take a bit of time to catch my breath and think about what's next for this prototype. Stay tuned in the months ahead for news about future episodes and live events. Follow me on LinkedIn to keep tabs on the latest. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Scott Leach of Brandspeak Communications for his production assistance on this series, and to Graham Barton for his original music. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.